Good evening, everyone. Board of Education, Middletown School Community. If you do recall, last board meeting on September 6th, we presented to the community, with the approval of the Board of Education, our next capital project that included a couple of different very important features within our school district as we continue to evaluate our buildings and our programs to meet the needs of our students, not only tomorrow, but well into the future. I'd like to begin by just reviewing the presentation that we presented on September the 6th to the community about this building proposed project. We talked about the extensive need for the roofs to be replaced, if you will, at both Monhegan Middle School and Maple Hill. Now, as we all know, that project is very much in need in repair. There is extensive issues with both of those roofs. Although what might seem to be relatively new buildings, this September they've been opened up for 21 years. The fact of the matter is that the roofs that were designed for those both of buildings do not really accommodate the harsh and severe winters that we've had over that period of time, and there's been extensive damage to the inside of the building and the need for it to be repaired. Monhegan Middle School garage roof there as well, obviously not as extensive as the two schools, as those buildings are large surface areas. Twin Towers roofing and flashing, you see it there for $670,000, and the masonry restoration work for over $3 million is necessary to maintain that building that was erected during the Works Progress administrations in the late 1930s, and I believe that building opened up in September of 1940. There, it's bleeding through the cement and stonework, and it needs extensive repair to maintain the validity of that masonry work, so that we don't have moisture leaking in and leaks into that building that is occurring at the present time. The last item up on that list is Middletown High School additions and alterations. And briefly, I'm not going to go over the entire need for all of this, but quickly summarize the fact that we are trying to address the increasing enrollment of that high school. Right now, we're about opening up at around 2,200 students in that building, and the projection in the next 3 years is to be close, as per our demographer, to 2,500 students, which is causing a great deal of overcrowding in particular, our cafeteria. So we started to look at different alternatives to address the overcrowding in the cafeteria, as well as a need to really have a, state-of-the-art TV production center. So all of those projects, including the very extensive work of both of those schools out there in County Route 78, you can see over $9 million for one roof, $8 million for another, where they will probably have to do that if approved by our voters, and I'm sure that the voters will see the need for all of this, will be in our December referendum. A total of almost $35 million, $34,880,000 to be exact. Next slide. So the question that was asked of me, how are we going to pay for this? Will the taxpayers of the Middletown School District have an increase? And as I had mentioned at that time, there would be no increase to the tax levy for our community. And I was asked that again by the board, and I stole a line from President Bush 1, read my lips, no increase in school taxes as a result of this building project. Why and how could that be possible when you're looking at almost $35 million, $34 million plus? Well, obviously there is 70% state aid from our building projects. So 70% of that building project cost will come from state aid. That's over a 20-year. We have to make state aid payments we will receive over 20 years. All right? So the estimated aid over 20 years will be $30 million. Still not close to 35. However, we will borrow $17 million, that's below our debt limit, to pay for the difference there over those 20 years. all right? So we are seeking a successful December referendum budget vote from our community in early December to have this move forward so our architects can get the plans up to state aid to provide the necessary projects outlined earlier today and also last week. All right, so where are we going to come and fund all $34,880,000? How's it going to happen? Well, each year in our unappropriated fund balance, we always allocate about this amount, for over $5 million, $5,680,000 to be exact. So we have that money to put forward that we have in our fund balance. Remember all of the dialogue that took place last spring about fund balance and why do you have fund balance? Here is a primary reason why we have a fund balance to take care of these building projects that are needed, among other issues. We also established a capital reserve, and we have $10 million in that capital reserve for these very purposes. If you recall, we had put away about $2,200,000 for some restoration that was into the media center. That would include some revision of moving the College and Career Center from the back of the existing media center now to the front and doing some changes inside there, as well as taking care of the wall that exists in front of the main lobby and working on some of those ramps out in front. So we had put $2 million plus to that project, and obviously we're going to put it to this major project. And of course, to remind you, we have a bonds of $17 million. So one might say, when you borrow money, you have to pay interest, and that cost, and who's paying for that? Well, the estimated average annual state aid, now each year for 20 years, we will receive on that 70% state aid, $1,902,000, $314,000 each year. And as we all know, when we borrow money, we have to pay it back. Well, in this case, we pay it back annually. And we have to pay back over 15 years, and that's important. We're going to receive aid for 20 years, $1,900,000 plus, right? And we have to pay annually $1,460,000 plus each year. So we have to pay back less than we're receiving, or an amount of $441,000 less local share that will come to us. So the total estimated state aid over 20 years, $30 million. What we have to pay back over that 20-year period is $23 million, $367,069, right? So the last item here, total estimated local share savings of almost $7,000. I'm sorry, $7 million, pardon me, $7 million. All right? So we have, as we should understand, these are estimated project overviews. So you say, why is it estimated? Well, the fact is that obviously interest rates may go up, all right? Costs may go up, labor costs may go up more than, but we have more savings than that will ever be presented to us, so that we will always have more money necessary to take care of any increased costs. So again, the total project of $34,880,000, estimated state aid of $30 million, estimated project cost was $4,803,000. Now, we have well over that amount of money, as in that previous slide that talked about what's in capital reserve, what's in our unappropriated fund balance we're going to use, et cetera, et cetera. So even if the costs, let's say, go to $6 million, we have savings more than that amount, so we'll take care of any increased costs on these estimates. Therefore, no tax levy increase as a result of this project to the taxpayer. No increase in taxes. So I'll entertain any questions from the board.
President, and thank you for the magnificent presentation and for the vision to make this project a reality, especially the no new taxes line.
Thank you.
It'll work, definitely. With respect to the borrowing, the $17 million, that figure, does that include the total interest that will be paid?
Yes, it does.
So that's including
The
the
interest is on that. Oh, the 20, no. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. I thought you were talking about the borrowing will take care of the total cost of the difference between the aids that we need. But the $23 million, if you go back to that one, includes the interest, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
And no further questions.
That includes the interest, yes.
Thank you for the presentation. It really did break things down, I think, to make it very understandable for a layperson who's new here and doesn't necessarily have all of the knowledge. And I think Kevin stole my other question about the interest, because it's clear there, 23.
I think it's also important to know when we're on these two slides, if you think about this, we're going to receive aid for 20 years. Go back to that other slide about the annual aid, and this one here. The first bubble here, you see that we're going to receive, right, $1,900,000 each year from state aid. We have to pay back for 15 years that amount of $1,400,000. That means in years 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, we're still receiving $1,900,000.
Yes.
So that's what I was referring to, that we will never have to worry about any increase of cost, because we also know there's some cost overrides or other issues that may escalate that cost, because we can't anticipate some of that. We estimate as close as we can. That's why most of these bubbles will say estimated. But the fact of the matter is that the amount that we receive is far more than we have to pay back because of our state aid being so high. So that we will have the money to take care of any override costs, as including the interest on borrowing money.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was my question about the last 5 years. George Herbert Walker Bush, you know what happened to him after he said that.
Yeah, I know.
But I believe you, and I know there will be no new taxes.
I was trying to stay away from the partisan politics. But,
Okay.
but I kept being asked the question about, you sure there'll be no taxes? And I'm saying increase. And I said, yes.
Yeah, and I know that to be true. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think that it's important for our community to realize that, number one, we're addressing the needs of not only students now, but looking to our future. And number two, that because of our rating, any money that we do borrow, we borrow at a really low interest rate.
Very, very favorable
Very,
interest
very,
rate.
very low.
Very favorable.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, let's go around first, and then I'll come back to you. Mr. Pierre, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the presentation. I think it's very fiscally responsible, as we aim to be. And I just want to hear one more time. Can you repeat that regarding the tax?
No increase of taxes as a result of this project
Thank you. Thank
to
you.
the taxpayer.
That's it.
Mrs. Tobiasen.
I guess one of the nice things about going next to last is that there aren't any questions. So I can only assume that what I heard was correct. No increase in taxes.
As a result of this project, that is correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love everything about the project. I have just two questions, which might just be one, but I'm going to ask both. So does this tie up our money as far as, like, are we no other projects for how long? Like,
No, we are not at the debt limits for the school district. We still have borrowing power as a result of this project. There's no way of knowing what may occur in the future, a year or two now, in terms of a building project. Certainly, if someone had asked me 3 years ago, do we need 2 new roofs out on County Route 78 at a middle school and elementary, I would probably say, no, it's fine. But then, as Mr. Scott and his crew has been demonstrating, the issues after each winter or during the winter about the safety needs, about snow falling off there, the inadequate design, if you will, of the heating and cooling that is occurring, all of the moisture and problems with the insulation that's, as we saw in the film clips that we demonstrated last board meeting, that has become necessary. So it's impossible, Mrs. Zooks, to know for sure what the future may bring. That's why we're not exhausting all of our reserve funds, because the reserve funds are for these emergency situations or these needs that come up. As far as I've been asked this week, if you're talking about increased enrollment at the high school and you're addressing the media center and the TV production center, what about the student enrollments that may be affected in classrooms? Remember, there are 9 periods in a day. Teachers teach 5 periods in a day. So that means that those rooms, in many of the rooms that don't have what they call itinerant teachers moving from room to room, we have the space to accommodate the children, especially with the additions that went on last year in terms of that 3rd floor. So right now, with the numbers projected for the high school out there, 3 or 4 years of 2,500 students, our building can accommodate that growth in terms of instructional programs and classrooms. This is the fact that right now we have 5 lunch periods. The first lunch period begins at 9:52 and it ends a little before 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That's a great span, lunch periods there, and obviously we can't have a 6th lunch period. It would be very difficult to serve lunch at 9:15 in the morning or the last period of the day on the back end of the instructional day. So it's really a necessity, not a nicety, if we talked about last time that we move forward with this project.
So I just wanted to make sure we do have money to, if we do need to go forward with another project, if something did pop up, it's not like we're just locking ourselves in.
Correct.
Okay. And the other thing,
Yeah, we still have over $5 million for capital reserves. We're in very good financial shape. You guys have done very, very well managing the money of this district in a very prudent way. We do not frivolously use money for, I'm going to go down to the words that we used in the spring in the media, but I will say the fact of the matter that we are very, very fiduciary responsible in this school district. And as a result of that, we're in this very good shape to do the things that are necessary for our kids, not only, as we mentioned, for tomorrow, but into the future.
thank you. Those are the words that I wanted to hear.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm a firm believer in local solutions to local problems. Whenever possible, keep the Washington, D.C. bureaucrats out. However, I'm just curious, does federal funding play any role here? Are there any funds earmarked by the federal government? I mean, so many voices in Congress talking about aid to education, so is there anything out there that we could use that's already been passed, approved, earmarked?
The answer is very complex. The answer, generally speaking, would be no, not in terms of this project. As you know, the 10th Amendment talks about the plenary power of the Constitution, which gives all what's not mentioned in the Constitution to the states. And that's how states become the advocates for their education inside their state, right? However, probably in the mid-60s, early 60s, mid-60s, the federal government started to infuse money through title grants and such to equalize educational opportunities for all students that were being deprived of equal protection under the law. So therefore, there are federal funds that flow through the state, through the state governments in terms of many title grants and grant and aids and so on and such, but not for this project.
Okay. I know, for example, the Americans with Disabilities Act have certain standards that every building and structure that bill has to be compliant with. So
Absolutely.
that the funds are being provided.
Absolutely. Any new construction that you have must be compliant with all the new regulations.
Good, okay.
That is correct.
And then my other question is, approved library project. I know we discussed wonderful library projects. I love the one where the library is in the middle of the cafeteria. Is this in reference to that project?
Yes, in other words,
Okay.
what was presented to the Board of Education at our annual retreat was the fact that we looked at various different alternatives to address this issue. And this was the least problematic in terms of providing food service to our children, as well as meeting the needs of the increased enrollment, so that there would be an auxiliary cafeteria in the footprint of the existing media center, and therefore the necessity to build a new media center, a separate part of the building at the high school, and tie in the front of the building with a canopy, and the fact that the TV production center now will have a state-of-the-art where there could be about a 16 or 17-foot room to have the cameras pulled back, and we can have full-body presentations as opposed to just the tabletops if you had a 10 or 9-foot ceiling, as we have now in the lower level where the production center was earmarked. Now, please remember, that was not poor planning. That was decided after those plans were made, well into the building stages where that would go, as we are moving forward with our journalism course, integrating with the TV production center.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for those questions, Mr. Gomez. You've answered all my questions, Mr. Superintendent. Just like to say, what we have here, it's not a frills. These are all very necessary. The enrollment of the high school just this year alone is up how many students? Over 200, is it not?
We have over 200. We'll know exactly that number the first Wednesday of October as its Beds Day is concerned. And you say, well, don't you know who's in the building now? Yes, but under state regulations, we are not permitted to eliminate students who may be no-shows into the buildings until that date. So therefore, we know that we received over 200 new entrants registered for the high school since July 1st up until last week. So we'll probably hit very, very, very close, if not that number of 2,200 students, because they closed in June about 2,150.
And the other question is, Rich, let's say if you did not do the cafeteria at this time, what would be the result?
Well, we would have to look for some other type of way in which to provide lunch to the children in a reasonable manner. We may have to use the last period of the day, obviously. Do we have to do split shifts of school, which is not a very desirable alternative? And the fact of the matter is that it would cause a real severe difficulty in the operation of that school. We would have to find some other less desirable place for them to have some type of, how should I say, cold lunch or lunches in that nature, pickups, maybe a vending machine type of lunch, which is not what's offered now. I went in to the cafeteria twice this past week to see the lunch periods, all right, and especially lunch period 5 and 6, where we have our C-Tech students coming from the morning C-Tech program coming back to the building to eat lunch, and then we have the students that are preparing to go to the afternoon C-Tech classes, period 5 and 6, which are the most heavily attended lunch periods. The fact of the matter, most of the children Without a doubt, you can ask food service to ascertain the veracity of my statement here, that the students promulgate mostly to the hot items served. There's no doubt that the longest line is for the hot lunch of the day, and that varies from day to day what it might be offered. But there's no doubt that our students prefer, based on the numbers, without a number exact that I have off the top of my head, but just from visual, and I had asked the food service workers, is this common every day? And they said yes. No, I can only surmise. I don't have any prima facie evidence to this, but I can only surmise that many of our students utilize that hot lunch as a significant hot lunch of nourishment for the day. It is a hot, long item. I'm not saying that they may not have nourishment at home. I'm just saying that that is the longest line every lunch period. And that would be very difficult to do in those other alternatives that I talked about without moving forward. Again, I said it on the 6th. I'll say it this evening, and if anyone comes to ask me, I'll give them the same honest answer, that the fact that these project items, in all of those outlined, are not necessities. They're not for aesthetic beauty. They're for necessities to prevent leakage into the building, moistures into the building. We're very concerned about mold into the building that causes by the leakage, and the fact that accommodating our students for lunch.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Mr. Toto, do you have anything to add? You good? Okay, thank you. Okay,
You're welcome.
we can go on to the next item now. Thank you.